The New York Mets sign Adbert Alzolay. Who's that, you ask? Well, I'm going to give you the full breakdown of who he is and when you can maybe expect to see him, as well as other hot stove updates. We have some small signings that went on around the league, nothing major, but if you want to be up to date, we want to give you all the facts that you need to know. So most of these reports are coming from MLBTradeRumors.com. It's a great place to look for stuff, but in case you don't have time to go read through all this, I wanted to give you a brief little rundown of everything. Welcome to Metropolitans. We are YouTube's smallest New York Mets and Miami Dolphins channel, covering baseball and football on here. So Adbert Alzolay, I'm going to read you a little bit from this article here by Dara McDonald. The Mets and right-hander Adbert Alzolay have agreed to a 2-year minor league deal. The righty underwent Tommy John surgery in August, will likely miss all of the 2025 season, though there is a chance that maybe he'd be available for a down the stretch or a playoff run, depending on how his healing goes. He is actually not too far removed from being the Chicago Cubs closer. So this is clearly a signing that is a long-term deal. In other words, you might not hear Alzolay's name spoken again regarding Mets news for the rest of this season. It might be more of a play for next year. The Cubs had an opportunity to have some control over him. However, they just decided not to really worry about that. They didn't want to just have someone on their roster, pay someone that wasn't going to be doing it. So the Mets jumped in. So a little bit on his stats here, just going back. So he is turning 30 in March, and he broke into the majors as a starter, occasionally flashed some promise, but also dealt with notable injury concerns after missing most of the 2022 season due to shoulder strains. The Cubs used him primarily in a relief role, which yielded very positive results. In 2023, Alzolay tossed 64 innings and 58 appearances, allowing a 2.67 ERA, which is actually not too bad at all, especially because as a reliever, your ERA can blow up very quickly with just one bad inning. He struck out 26.5% of the batters he's faced, while only giving out walks 5.1% of the time. So relatively good control. He took over the ninth inning duties for the Cubs and racked up 22 saves. But then he got injured again last year. He made 18 appearances in the first few weeks, and his ERA was 4.67, and velocity was down, and that's when he landed on the injured list to a forearm strain. He tried to rehab, and alas, that did not work, and so then he opted for the Tommy John surgery. So it's one of those, will he be back, and will he be good as new? Well, the good news is this is not a huge investment for the Mets. This is essentially just a little gamble, a little roll of the dice. I'm trying to see if I see any. It's just a 2-year minor league deal, so he's not even going to be on the 40-man roster. Generally, it's a 14-month timeline, and surgery was in August. So you're talking like October, ideally, is when he'd be ready, but that's maybe late postseason. But are you really going to trust him in that if you're going postseason at that point? Probably not. So anyway, this is just kind of a simple little signing for the Mets. Nothing crazy, nothing that's going to really impact them this season. But it is this idea of kind of stockpiling arms, building the farm system. Even though he's an older guy, it's still giving your farm system just a new jolt of energy and different things. All right, a couple other things. Mentioned earlier today in a short, J.D. Davis, the former New York Met, ended up signing with the Los Angeles Angels. He's going to be battling for the final, probably last 1 or 2 roster spots on the team. The Angels have a pretty crowded bench, so it's kind of a long shot for him, but I certainly wish him well, and I appreciate the time that he was with us, even though it didn't really end great. I'm still always a fan, of 99% of the Mets who have been in our system. That's just who I am. It's like, hey, if you provided me one highlight, one smile, I'm going to cheer for you, unless you totally trash the team on the way out. Also, I saw some rumors today that the Mets have been interested again in Max Scherzer. I don't think that would be a great reunion. However, the Mets are clearly looking for arms. If you could get them for cheap for a 1-year deal, maybe. But I know for sure Cohen is not going to be going all in on Max Scherzer on any sort of crazy multi-year deal, high AAV. It's just not going to do it. And so, um, also, it turns out the Mets were actually in. They had a lot of interest in Yerkson Profar, who ended up signing with the Braves. We covered that yesterday, but it sounds like the Mets were still interested in picking up another outfielder, even with Jesse Winker being back. So that's kind of the basic of the main Mets news. Okay. For those of you who follow retirements, Tyler Sir, he announced his retirement today. I believe he was with the Athletics for a while. Um, and then he also, yeah, I'm trying to see. Yeah, he ended up pitching against the Mets in the postseason for the Phillies a couple years ago. All right, this is kind of an under the radar signing, not seeing too much, and I apologize if I botched this name. The Washington Nationals signed Shinnosuke Ogasawara. So I don't know if I pronounced that right, but I was just reading up on him a little bit, and I think this is a really good deal for the Nationals. It's really low risk. So altogether, it's a 2-year deal. It's going to cost the Nationals 4.2 million altogether, and that includes a $700,000 posting fee. So, and but I was looking at some of his concerns are about his strikeout rate. That his strikeout percentage has been going down recently, and that generally doesn't transfer well into the major leagues. But if you're kind of a younger club like the Nationals are, bring someone in. He's 27 years old. He's pitched almost 1,000 innings in his career, and so his overall ERA is 3.62 over those 900 plus innings. So I really, I like this signing for the Nationals. It's low risk. Um, he's a little bit shorter, but similar stature um, to some of the other players who have come over as well. Obviously, not getting anywhere near the news and coverage as Hiroki Sasaki did or anything like that. But see, some of this article says some comparisons to Shota and Managa. So I just like it. I think this is like a low risk signing. It's great for a club like the Nationals to have in, and I wish him well and success, just not against the Mets. And so we've got that. In terms of Pete Alonso, yeah, bipolar bear, we don't deserve you, Jonathan. Um, there's lots of Pete Alonso Blue Jays rumors. That's about all I'm seeing anywhere. It's about half the rumors are he's coming back to the Mets and he's using the Blue Jays for leverage. The other half the rumors are he's going to the Blue Jays and he's using the Mets for leverage. Like that's about it. I don't know what to make of it. I don't have the answer one way or the other. I would love to have Pete back. I think if Pete doesn't come back, the Mets definitely have a hole in the lineup that they're going to have to figure out how to fill. There were some rumors I read today that both Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio were taking some practice, or sorry, Mark Vientos, I believe, is not Mauricio. My apologies. Both Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos were taking some reps at first base in the offseason just to kind of see. So I guess if you're interested in having Brett Beatty on the roster, you want to see him get another shot at things. Pete not coming back maybe gives a chance for the rest of the baby Mets to really all be together on the team at the same time, and maybe with just another year of development, maybe Beatty's ready. I mean, I know a lot of people are ready to give up on Beatty, but I saw a lot of things that I just see a lot of promise there. If you kind of remember Alec Boehm when he came up for the Phillies at first, it was kind of this like he just didn't really have it, and it just took him a while. It took a couple of years, and now last year Boehm was an all-star. I feel like there could be a similar trajectory for Brett Beatty, but he's going to need the chance. And I don't know, maybe there's a blessing in disguise here. So I agree. So coconuts, I agree that, and I've commented on this multiple times. Pete bet on himself, and just as just a general life lesson, I think it's great to bet on yourself. I really do. I think more people need to bet on themselves, but the reality of that also is sometimes when you bet on yourself, it's just not going to pay off. Sometimes you're going to bet on yourself and you're going to apply for that new job that like is going to look better for you and it just doesn't work out, or you quit your one job to move to something better and it turns out that the new job is worse than the old job was. Like sometimes that's what happens, and that's life, and you have to decide how are you going to handle that when you move on. And I think there's a lot of leverage games being played here. I'm not sure or convinced that it really makes sense for any team to have both Vlad and Pete. And if it ends up essentially just being a first baseman swap when all is said and done, I don't think too many Mets fans would be upset about that, right? I feel like if you could get Vlad and you put Vlad in this lineup instead of Pete, I don't feel like anybody's like, oh my goodness, our lineup is not there. I definitely think um, I think that there's room for one. I just don't know how it would really look. I know Vlad can play some third. If and are the Blue Jays going to look to sign Pete and then move Vlad to third, or are the Mets just going to say, look, we're not going to overpay this year, and we're going to just throw a heap ton of money at Vlad next year? Maybe. I mean, again, just as a Mets fan, and my kids love Pete Alonso, and I've done a lot of Pete Alonso coverage on here. I'd like to have him back. I would. But he bet on himself and he didn't have the season that he needed. And I know he had the one huge home run in the playoffs, but I guess from a contract standpoint, it was kind of too little, too late to get the type of deal that he was looking for. Now, maybe the Blue Jays will surprise us, or maybe there'll be a surprise team. I was kind of surveying like what surprise team do you think? I wonder if a team like the Giants. It feels like the Giants keep missing out on all these big free agents. I wonder if they're just got a stockpile of money that they'd be throwing at them. I feel like at some point in time we're gonna see. I feel like you're gonna see at least another name start being bandied about more. And again, I feel like that's just in the very least it's to get leverage, and not from there. Yeah, I don't know why I've only seen the rumor in one place, and I haven't seen the Scherzer rumor substantiated elsewhere. I mean, of the two that we had, I'd rather have Verlander, or honestly, I'd rather take a 1-year deal, a flyer on Kershaw than Mad Max at this point, just because of how he left the team. I think had he left, I mean, like he had some good performances in the regular season. It just didn't work out in the postseason, and then how he left, I know that left a bad taste in a lot of fans' mouths. So, I mean, if we're going to take a 1-year flyer on a veteran pitcher, at this point in time, I'd take it on Kershaw. That's where I would. If the Mets want to make that splash and they just like, look, we just need somebody else. We need a veteran arm in this rotation. I would take Kershaw and over Max. That's just my opinion. I don't know. What do you guys think? I would love to hear your thoughts on any of these or any other rumors. Like, obviously, I don't catch every single rumor that's out there, but I'm just wanting to kind of cover the things that I have heard. Corey, how's it going? Appreciate you hanging out with us here tonight. And I know you're up in Canada, so I don't know if Pete Alonso is going to be joining you there. Pavetta, Flaherty. Yeah, I'm not a big Flaherty fan. I don't know. I mean, I'm still seeing Kershaw back to the Dodgers, but I don't know, just of all the ones that I feel like if we got to the postseason, who's the pitcher that I want pitching of the older vets? To me, I'm just Kershaw. Kershaw would be the one that I would personally take the flyer on. So it's good. Aaron Judge could have gotten 400 mil from the Padres and Giants. Who knew staying put for less makes more sense. Well, I agree, and I think the other big part is the branding. Pete Alonso could have been, could still be, whatever. He could be the branding star of the New York Mets. I mean, if you talk about how beloved, Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry and, Ron Darling and Keith Hernandez, Howard Johnson, like he has the chance to do that here because he could be, because I know Soto's here, but he could still essentially be the face of the New York Mets in terms of just being out front, endorsement deals, and all these other things. And kind of my plea, because I have, if you guys haven't seen it, I have a video on the channel. I wrote a letter, a verbal letter that I wrote to Pete Alonso, an open letter to Pete Alonso, and I just you have the chance to be the face of the Mets as well as all these endorsement deals and just be beloved. And I feel like Pete's like just on the cusp of essentially taking over like the Mets and being this, even if he doesn't stay for this entire career, I mean, Darryl Strawberry wasn't with the Mets his whole career. Doc Gooden wasn't with the Mets his whole career, but they're still beloved. And the path of David Wright, of course, David Wright was a lifelong Met, but there's lots of Mets that weren't lifelong Mets that we still hold near and dear to our hearts. And I don't know. I understand why he wants to maximize his earnings. Okay. And I know for maybe you and I, it doesn't make sense. These are when you're talking, what's the difference between 20 million or 18 million dollars a year? I know it, I know it doesn't sound like much to us, but what's the difference to you between $36,000 and $40,000 of salary, right? Like you're gonna take all things being equal, you're gonna take the bump in pay. And so I know some of these things maybe don't seem to matter. They're hard for us to comprehend, but it's just pure math, and you just have to kind of detach yourself from the dollar signs and understand that both, like, yes, you know Cohen's got the money, but he's also already played this game of overspending to keep people or to get people here, and it didn't work out. And if you want to see a long term steady organization, then you've got to figure out how to choose when to spend your money big and when to save money and when to pounce on free agents and when to let them pass. And doesn't mean that you're not going to be in the discussion, but you're just not going to win every battle. Or if you choose to win every battle, it doesn't mean just because you win the battle, it was actually a good signing. So Shohei Ohtani, interpreter, racked up $40 million in gambling debts. I don't know what the full number was, but who does that and who would allow that? Well, yeah, I don't know. There's still lots of interesting stuff on that story. I feel like MLB just wanted to get that swept under the rug as quick as possible, and I don't blame them. They just, Otani the Patrick Mahomes of baseball? I don't know. I just feel like they've got to protect his image is so important to the game. They've got to just protect, protect, protect. That is true. That is true. So I don't know what all happened there. I don't know what there. Yeah. No, I agree. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you've got to there is a real benefit to hiring these guys who have done amazing in small markets and then giving them the large budget, because they know how to both cherry pick the bottom end of the talent and the top end of the talent. And it's hard because as a fan, you want to get attached to these players, right? We all want the star to be the lifelong, fully with the team his whole career. That's what we want. That's like the romantic part about baseball. But I'm going to use a parallel in this. It's going to seem maybe completely irrelevant to you, but my son this year, and he's playing little league. He's in the AAA division, so like one step below the divisions that you see on ESPN. So like the 8 to 10-year-old league. And we moved into a new district. We're still in the same town, but we're in a new little league district. And he starts over with a brand new team. And like initially, it was like hard for him because he's like, "Well, I want to be with my friends." Well, one, most of your friends are all scattered to different leagues this year because he's basically been on the same core team for 2 years in a row. And part of it is just me teaching, like, look, this is just the business of baseball. Every season, you get a new team. Every single season, you get a new team. And even if it's 90% the same, that 10% that's different makes a huge difference, right? Like, look at the Mets before and after Jesse Winker last year, right? Like the edge that he brought, it's a different team. And, Iglesias, it's a different team. That last year's season is going to always stand alone as a single season. And that's ultimately what it is. And I know we all want to have it, but the reality is baseball as a business just doesn't do it. Now, I would love if baseball were ever to go to some form of a salary cap, this would be my proposal: is that you would only call only I don't know the right way to phrase this, but only half of the salary would count against the cap if it was a homegrown talent who had never left the team. In other words, rewarding teams by not penalizing them. So I feel like this would be really interesting. Like, what if there was no Cohen tax on on going on Pete Alonso's salary because he's a homegrown talent and being re-signed. I think if you want to have this, because I think it's good for baseball. I really do. I think it's good for baseball. I think it's good for kids, right? And even though, like, yeah, growing up, the '86 Mets didn't stay together forever, but that was still a good chunk of my childhood. I would say like 80, 85 to 91 was like kind of a core component that group was together. I think it's better for your young fans to have players that stay there for a long time. I mean, there's already rumors that Paul Skeens wants out of Pittsburgh, and his contract isn't even up for 4 more years. It's like that's not good for baseball. Like I get that these players want to max it out, but yeah, no, and I agree. Like you're not going to get a floor without a cap. The owners would never go for a floor without also having a cap. But on the same time, you can't have a cap while also having a floor. But I would just love to say, let's incentivize teams for re-signing homegrown talent. And by homegrown, I don't mean necessarily drafted all the way to the majors, but I mean a player who debuts in the majors for a team. I feel like you should get some sort of either benefit or at in the very least not be punished for doing it. And I wonder if there was no Cohen tax, or if Cohen knew he could spend, an extra 3 million or 4 million a year on Pete here without having to pay a luxury tax on top of it because he's re-signing a homegrown player. I wonder if that would be much more likely. And I wonder if teams like the Marlins and the Rays and the Pirates, if you knew that you could sign Paul Skeens, but it wasn't going to count against your salary cap, like you could go so much bigger on those things, and you could do it. And maybe the same, I don't know if you could, there's a contrary side of it for the player, that you could somehow reward a player for re-signing with the team that brought him up to the majors. I know in a lot of cases it's not always going to be the case, but I think Major League Baseball would be, I think it would be in their best interest to at least research ways to encourage teams that to re-sign players, whether they're technically homegrown or like the constant moving around is tough because it's like if you don't follow and you're not following the off season, there's a lot. So I don't know, just kind of random ideas in my head. I've just thought about that over the last couple of years. If you could do a salary cap, but then anyone that you re-sign or any homegrown talent that you re-sign is exempt from the salary cap. It'd be a really cool way that your best players on your teams would have, they're more likely to stay, right? If money is the end all be all and the home team, the homegrown talent team has, you know, can spend an extra 10% because it won't count against the cap, it's going to encourage more players to stay home. And I would say too, if you could find some sort of escalator clause too, where maybe the players union would give extra bonuses somehow. If the players union could like secure extra bonuses anytime a player re-signs with his team, get an extra $500,000 bonus for re-signing with your team for a multi-year deal or something. But yeah, none of the contracts are guaranteed. It's kind of more like, it's a little bit like football, but not the cap like football, but the not guaranteed contract. I just don't think the players are gonna. I think you'd have a work stoppage before the players would ever agree to having non-guaranteed contracts. And I get it. Like I said, these numbers, these millions of dollars, are for most of us are just almost impossible to fathom. But you're also dealing with a multi-billion-dollar industry. I don't even know. Maybe is it a trillion-dollar industry, Major League Baseball? I don't know, but it's at least a multi-billion-dollar industry with the values of these teams and the revenue that's brought in, and players want to get what they deem as their fair share. The one thing I hope for Pete Alonso is I hope he's not sitting out. As much as I want him back and as much as I don't want him to go somewhere, I don't you know I don't want him to waste his talent by sitting out and not being signed with a team, for sure. Well, that's true, Jonathan. I think that's partly true, but don't you think that if they could somehow figure out a way to sign some of their players long term, they would do so? I mean, even the Pirates, they held on to Andrew McCutchen for quite a while, and I mean, the Rays have held on to some players for a while. The Marlins never seem to have done that, but I think if somehow you could benefit these teams, if you have to incentivize it. if it's something that you think is valuable. I just think it would be valuable for the major league to incentivize more players to stay with one team for a longer chunk of time. It may not work all the way to the end of a career, but yeah, right, exactly. But I mean, that's the whole thing is Joey Votto then becomes this legend. I know he ended up signing with another team, right? But he didn't end up playing in the majors, then he retired. I mean, he gets to go into the Hall of Fame. I mean, I'm pretty sure Joey Votto is a Hall of Famer. He's going to get to go into the Hall of Fame as a lifelong Red. And I know David Wright, his career was cut short because of injury, but he's like always going to be a Met. There's there, and it's even if they don't stay with the team the whole way through, right? It's like you know, Ken Griffey Jr. Yeah, he ended up Mariners Reds, and then like didn't he end up on the White Sox or something? But nobody thinks that Ken Griffey Jr. is a White Sox. I think mostly Mariners, a little bit of Reds, right? Like that's just where you associate him with. And I know free agency, like some players, you're always going to be just like if you're a left-handed reliever, you're probably going to end up on 5 or 6 teams in your career. That's a different story here. But when you're talking about major position players and the Aaron Judges of the world, and sometimes the players are going to choose and give their home team a little bit of a discount, but if you could incentivize the team as well, I think it would just be really good for that. So yeah, well, and that's what the Mets just did. The Mets just used a bunch of their money on their international signing player. Yeah, well, exactly, because it stayed through, and that's the thing. Like David Wright, it's the same thing as Edgar Martinez. Like you're exactly right. Just because they're there, and Joey Votto's always going to be loved by Reds fans, and you can be like, well, I don't want to play against him, and or whatever, doesn't matter. But the fact is, like, that's good. That to me, that's good for baseball, and it's good for young fans to like grow up with players who are with that team for a really long time. And obviously, it's too complicated to have an expectation that's going to happen for more than 1 or 2 players per team. But I would just really like to see it where we could just get more players sticking with teams over a long period of time. I think it benefits the young fans. Like I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here. Yeah, no, I know. We already covered that. Bellinger, Davis signed with the Angels. He's going to be fighting for their final bench spot. So yeah, but it's still relevant. I think some Mets fans still follow along. I like to follow along with former Mets players as much as possible. So yeah, no, and I agree. I agree. It seems to me it's in Alonso's best interest and the Mets' best interest. And I just wonder how much of this is things that are going on. Um, I have leverage, right? There's a lot of leverage, lots of leverage. Both sides are playing leverage. Steve Cohen's a businessman, Scott Boras is a businessman. They're doing businessman things. That's what they're doing. And so that's why I don't know how much stock to really put in the Blue Jays because every other day the headlines like one day Blue Jays and Alonso are close to signing. The next day, Alonso and Mets are talking again, and talks are it's back and forth. And like I said, I expect in a day or two you're going to hear about a mystery team popping up for that's interested in Alonso. That's always what seems to happen because it's just leverage, right? And that's how it is. So let's see. I think I covered everything. Appreciate you guys. Bellinger, Coconuts, Jonathan, thank you guys for hanging out with us. We are YouTube's smallest New York Mets and Miami Dolphins channel. So appreciate you guys. If you haven't hit that subscribe yet, we just crossed the 50 subscriber button. I'm going to be doing some what I've done on a previous channel, but which is what inspired me to start this channel because we got a lot of good feedback with it. I do food delivery, and then I also like talk football while I'm doing food delivery, or we'll kind of do some play-by-play. I'm a big fan of Tom Grassi, and Grassi has rated my other channel a couple of times during football streams, and he's been a really great friend. He even mentioned us on the live stream on my other channel, which is kind of like a life improvement channel. But this channel is going to be all sports and baseball and football primarily. Though we dip our toe into March Madness a little bit. I don't do too much basketball or hockey. They're just not really my sports. But I'd always take free tickets to any sporting event for the most part. But I don't really follow much basketball outside of the March Madness tournament. And but anyway, that's what we got here. If you guys got anything else you want to share, yeah, I hope I'm still hopeful. I'm still hopeful that something will work out with Pete. 3 year. I could see. I think they were offering like 3 years and 60. I wonder if the Mets would pop up to like 3 years, 66 million, something like that. I, yeah. I mean, I guess the answer to that question, Jonathan, from Pete's perspective is, let's see how the end of this negotiation works out. Like we don't like it as fans, but from Pete's side, as looking at it as a business, if Pete gets what he wants, then gets what he wants. And I just, it's probably in Pete's best interest to try to sign a 3 year deal with opt outs after year one and year two. That way he has 3 years to put up a monster season, and all he needs is one of those 3 years to be a monster season. But I don't know, how much would you really want Pete Alonso on a 3 year deal trying to impress and like putting pressure on himself? It feels like now maybe the playoffs is a change. And I feel like, man, if he goes to another team, he's absolutely going to destroy us when we face him. So uh, he's a better, more prolific home run hitter than a Justin Turner. But my goodness, when you remember, like, we had Justin Turner, and then he just destroyed us for years. By the way, he's still a free agent too, from as far as what I know. So I wouldn't. I wonder if there'd be a chance of a reunion there as well. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, because Boris, he's the agent for Nimmo too, and there was no issue getting a Nimmo deal done. But I think the difference was Nimmo was content. Nimmo wanted to stay with the Mets, and I think he told Boris, like, yeah, obviously make me the most that you can, but I want to just get this done. I'm a Met at heart, and I want to play for the Mets, and I think that's kind of an interesting, yeah. Well, right, exactly. And like that's why you hire an agent. And it's, again, like, I keep repeating this, but it's like it's so hard for us to fathom the dollars that these players are dealing with and the money that they're playing with. But you have to remember, of course, there's taxes, there's agent fees, right? And so there, I forget the name of the tax, but there's a tax. You pay a tax based on where you play your game. So right, so every game that Pete plays in New York, he's taxed at the New York rate. Now that means, though, for his income tax, like when he comes and plays in Florida, then he's not taxed whenever, because there's no Florida income tax. So he's not taxed anytime the Mets play in Miami or Tampa, because there's no state income tax. And so when you look at the numbers, like, yes, that's the number. However, that number of what actually ends up in their bank account is a whole lot less than that. So and I realize it's still life-changing money for probably most of us here, but it needs to be considered that these deals, you're only going to get one, maybe two amazing deals in your career. That's why Soto bet on himself, and he turned down because he knew he had one shot. He knew he had one shot to get the amazing deal, and he did it. Now maybe he can opt out later on down the road and get one more amazing deal if he can time it just right. But with Pete, right, he knows too. He knows the trajectory of big first basemen, that they tend to go downhill. So why is Pete going to want to, like? And that's where I think ultimately the biggest mistake from Pete was not signing that. Was it 6 year, $158 million deal? I believe that's what it was that he turned down. I'm like, had he signed that, it's probably about, because what does that work out to? I'm gonna do some quick math here. My brain's too, I can't math that in my head. 158 divided by 6. So that was like 26 a year. I mean, even a high AAV, what do you think he's going to get? 30 mil a year? I mean, wouldn't he have been better to have just locked that up, 158 for 6? And it's probably going to turn out that's that might be the best deal that he was going to see, and he passed on it. And it's the risk. It's the risk and the reward. Sometimes you take the risk like Soto did, and you get the monster paycheck. And sometimes you take the risk like Conforto did, and it totally flops. I mean, I think Conforto would have staying with the Mets would have been a whole lot better. And I kind of hope Pete realizes that, like, yeah, there's just something about having those same fans, that clubhouse, and that could be really good for him. So there you go. I like the way you're thinking, Jonathan. Yeah, no, I mean, Boris does work for the players, and ultimately, Pete can just say, "Look, I want to be a New York Met, and I want to be playing first base on opening day. I want to be at spring training with my teammates. Get me the," and that's all that this is. Like, there's a good part of me that thinks that all this Blue Jay stuff is completely fake. Remember how that there was all that Blue Jays stuff with Shohei Ohtani? I never bought into that. I didn't think there was any chance Ohtani was going anywhere but the Dodgers. There was just too obvious. Like, you knew he wasn't going to stay with the Angels. I just figured for sure he wanted the West Coast, and it was like it felt like Ohtani's agent just played the Blue Jays like a fiddle, and then also use that as leverage to get the max contract. So, is there something here? I'm just wondering, do agents know that you can kind of run teasers on the Blue Jays, use them for leverage, and then kind of say, like, hey, let's come back? I mean, maybe the Mets wouldn't do it, but would Pete come back for that 6-year 158 if the Mets offered it? I don't know if the Mets would offer it, but would Pete take that at this point in time? He might, right? That because he's 30. Pete's 30, I believe. So that brings him 30 to 36, and then take that 158 million. Again, I'm not saying that it's on the table, but I wonder if he would take it. Yeah. No, exactly. Like, where else? So, I mean, even if you opened up the full West Coast, like, is he going to go to Seattle? I mean, maybe, maybe he would have gone to Seattle, but Seattle wasn't going to pay up. There's only a few teams that could legitimately afford what he wanted. I mean, I'm sure the Mets would have taken him had he wanted to sign, but he wasn't going to sign. He was going to go West Coast, and so it's like, so that's what I wonder here. Why is it all this Blue Jays thing? It always feels like either the Blue Jays or the Giants are always being used for leverage. Like, it just always feels like they're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Doesn't it just, I don't know, it feels like every time there's big names, like big names, it's like the Blue Jays are in the mix. And now even a little more recently, the Red Sox feel like they're sometimes in the mix too. Like, it just, I don't know. Why does it just always feel like those are some of the teams that are just, they're there and then they get mentioned, but then no one ever actually signs with them. So I wonder if there's just something known that those teams are really good leverage teams. I don't know. Are you saying you'll get a tattoo if the Mets win? I don't know if I'll get a tattoo, but well, that's kind of my big thing too in my open letter to Pete Alonso. I just said, look, you've been here through some ups and downs. Like, the Mets have had some good seasons and some rough seasons. It's like, we're turning the corner here. I really believe, as a franchise, and I'm not just talking about last year. I'm saying the way the organization is being run. We're being run a lot more like the Braves and the Dodgers than like the Marlins. And it's like, you've got a chance to be a part of something here. Because where is he going to go? Where obviously there's no guarantees, but where you've got someone who is genuinely going to be feared more than you in the lineup with you, right? Like, that's so huge. And I mean, and that's not even counting what maybe Vientos. Now I'm a little pull the reins back on Vientos a little bit, just because I've seen so many sophomore slumps in my life. And so I want Mets fans to put out a really low expectation for Vientos this year. Not like that he's going to be horrible, but I would not be surprised if his numbers drop a little bit this year. Last year was like you catch everybody off guard, and then this year's kind of like the pitchers adjust, and then next year and beyond, it kind of be on him to make those adjustments. But you started to see, as Vientos got better, then Pete started getting more pitches. And when the pressure came off is when Pete did better. And it's like, to me, with Soto in this lineup now, there's minimal pressure on Pete. Like, Pete, your job is to go up there and hit a home run. We don't care about your average, right? We don't care if you're hitting 220, 230, if you're cranking out 50 home runs. And if Pete could just go up there in, not every situation, you know what I'm saying, but the vast majority of situations, he's just looking for a ball to drive, and that's it. Because even if he strikes out, it's not a big deal because you've built up enough of a roster around him. I don't I feel like there's a I feel like this is a great scenario for him because now Pete just gets to be like Pete's like that overgrown kid he's like the kid who took everything super seriously, but he's still a kid at heart. That's who Pete Alonso is, right? I always think of him like how he's concentrating before the home run derby and everything like that. He's like that kid who takes everything super seriously, even when it's not that serious. But it's like you can do that and then have no pressure on you and doing that. Mariners can get good pitching and never a big bat. Pete Alonso would be great for them, like Aaron Judge. Yeah, I agree, but I think I don't know. Pete's not ever shown me that he's ready to be the main guy. Pete is like an amazing like community guy. He's an amazing, you know, he's obviously a great power hitter. No one would dispute that. At least no sane person would dispute that. But um, yeah, I like that. Yeah, Pete going to the Rockies for a season, just. But I mean, if he goes to Colorado and he hits 40 home runs, that's not going to play well. He'd have to be like career high in Colorado. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I want him, and this is as a Mets and a Dolphins fan, right? So I've celebrated one professional championship in my life. Right, one, 1986. That's it. Dolphins haven't won a Super Bowl in my lifetime. Mets have won one World Series in my lifetime. Like I said, I don't really follow basketball and hockey. That's it. I got one championship in over 40 years of living and breathing. Like Boston fans have had like what 15 in the last 20 years. I've had one in my life. And I want it. I want it. I feel bad for David Wright that when the Mets went on that run a couple years ago to the World Series, like, it's like, I just wish like David Wright would have been he would have been pretty old, but he could have been a part of some of these runs had he stayed healthy. And I feel like he probably would have stayed with the Mets as long as the Mets would have kept him. And I feel like it would be really, really nice. Yeah, exactly. It's if with Soto here, it's Alonso's team, but all the pressure's on Soto. Because it doesn't matter what contract Pete gets, no one's going to be like, oh my goodness, now you have to carry the team. Like you're signing him to be the home run hitter. And if you want Soto up before him, if you want Soto up after him, if you want Soto in the 2 hole, and you want Vientos after him, and but I'm going to tell you from the Mets standpoint, I mean, how would you feel if we didn't add Bregman, we didn't bring Alonso back? Like, how do you feel about an infield that's going to basically be you know, Acuna. I mean, Acuna's looking amazing in winter ball. So, I mean, I feel pretty good about that. So you got Acuna, Lindor, Vientos, Beatty. If one of those two catches on at first base, I mean, are you good with that infield? And you throw Beatty down in the 9 hole, take some of the pressure off of his hitting for right now. Or put him in the 8 hole, put Alvarez in the 9 hole. You feel good with that? I know the Mets are still trying to deal Marte. I think that's probably why they were in on Profar, is like they if they could get Profar in, then they could even just release Marte or trade him for some peanuts or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, do you feel good about that infield? It's Lindor and the baby Mets for your infield. I just feel like you're missing that other guy in the lineup who can just hit a home run. And I mean, I don't know. Do the Mets then reach out to a JD Martinez? Do they Justin Turner still out there? Do the Mets reach out to someone like that? I don't know. Hard to say. But just kind of curious. Appreciate you guys hanging out, and I'm trying to do these streams a little bit more. I don't have an exact set time yet. I'll do like little shorts and updates throughout the day, but I'm gonna try to do some live streams once the games actually start. At least once regular season starts. I don't know how much patience I have to live stream. Spring training games just because of it, but want to do it. So I appreciate you guys. Yeah, Randall. I never know how to say that name, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah. I don't know. And I still say I wouldn't be surprised if the Mets snipe one of these vet pitchers. And like I said, if I could pick one, just personally, I would pick Kershaw. I know some of you guys are saying Flaherty. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, if you need him, I feel like Martinez just he started out strong and just wore down but at the end of the season. But I mean, if you just need somebody just to get you through the first 3 months of the year and then you trade for someone at the trade deadline, I mean, maybe Vladdy comes available at the trade deadline. Um, I don't know, but the Mets aren't. I can't see any realistic way that they're done making moves. It looks like they want one more big bat. This is just again no inside information, just my observation of what I've been reading. They want one more big bat, and obviously, if they can get Pete or Bregman or somehow work out a trade for Vladdy, and I do wonder if the Blue Jays are serious on Pete. Like, what are they going to do? Are they really going to move Vlad to third, or are they going to platoon first in DH? Like, I don't know. I don't know if you really want Vladdy at third. Anyway, if the Blue Jays sign Pete, then I wonder if you could literally end up then with like a trade. You get like throw Beatty and a couple other guys in for a trade for Vladdy. I mean, I don't know what that deal would have to look like, but um, but I think the Mets are still wanting an outfielder, even if it's not a top name outfielder. I think the Mets want one more outfielder. Obviously, they'd love to trade Marte if they could. And I think they're looking for at least one more starting pitcher. And I would not be surprised if they get some vet on a 1 year deal with like a 2 year option, something like that. Right. Well, no, I mean, I bet the Blue Jays know if Vlad's coming back or not, and that's maybe why there's so many rumors. But if Pete signs with the Blue Jays, I wouldn't be surprised if Vladdy got dealt. Maybe not to the Mets, but I wouldn't be surprised. Like, why not get some value out of it? Because you get more value now than if you trade him at the trade deadline. And if you're like, hey, we're going to sign Pete for 3 years, we'll trade Vladdy now, we'll restock our farm system. Probably from baseball statistics standpoint, it's a slight downgrade to go from Vlad to Pete, but it's not a huge downgrade by any means. At least not if you're just looking for more home runs and power. Like you could argue that Vladdy's better in the field and his batting average is better and stuff like that, but it's still not a huge downgrade. There are plenty of teams that would take either one of those players. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but I'm expecting one more vet starting pitcher, one more mid-tier outfielder, mid to low tier, like again, you're just looking for someone who's serviceable to replace a Marte. So maybe like a speed guy or something like that. But I mean, you got Soto and Nimmo, and you got Winker, and but I think they'd probably prefer Winker to be more DH platoon. And I mean, everything's coming together. I would like the Mets to get a better backup catcher, but that's kind of more of my dream list. So awesome. Well, appreciate you all. Thank you so much for hanging out. And I'm going to put out I still got to get my football picks out for this weekend, so we'll do that. And I'm going to we'll try to do breaking news. If there's any major Mets news, we'll do that. But we wanted to cover the Alzolay. He's going to be on the injured list here for this year, for recovering from Tommy John surgery. But that was Met signing of the day, and good talking baseball with all of you. Spring training pitchers and catchers report soon. It's like 17 days or something like that. It's soon, guys. We'll be back to baseball, and I'll be back in my happy zone. Stay safe, everybody. I know it's cold everywhere, and I'm in Southwest Florida, by the way, guys. We're supposed to get in the 30s down in Southwest Florida tonight. So if we're getting in the 30s, I know it's got to be just brutal cold all over the country. It's our coldest weather here in 3 years, and so stay safe, please, please, please. And if you're out on the roads and they're icy and snowy, please stay safe. I appreciate you all. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do so. I'd appreciate it so much. And I'll see you guys again soon. Have an awesome night.